Hello, I am Dr. Sana Hashmi, a fellow at Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. And this week in my print Eye on China column, I talked about the prospects of quadrilateral security dialogue, now which is called as the Quad, as Donald Trump comes back to power to the White House. So, as Trump appears poised to make his way back to the White House, questions are now being raised about the future of the US traditional alliances system, as well as Trump's approach towards multilateralism and regional groupings. And when we talk about regional groupings, one of the most important groupings is the Quad. So, the Quad, comprising Japan, India, Australia, and the United States, has been a centerpiece of strategic discussions in China, specifically since it was revived during Trump's first term. Initially, it was kind of established as a security grouping back in 2007, 2008. Now, the Quad took on new momentum as a counterbalance to China's growing influence in the Indo Pacific region. And at the same time, we saw how the Indo Pacific region was emerged and how India's role as a responsible stakeholder as a collective as a part of collective security effort was kind of recognized. So now as we look towards Trump 2.0, the question is, uh, will Quad remain resilient or will it falter under his leadership style? So, of course, one of the main points about his leadership and the thing that we keep hearing there is uncertainty about how he's going to deal with China, with the Quad, and the Indo Pacific region, how his foreign policy is going to look. There are a lot of people who believe that his foreign policy might be in continuation as we have what we have seen during Trump 1.0, and there would be elements of continuity from Biden administration as well. As in, these are just speculations. Uh, there's not a clear idea about how this is going to pan out. So now, as we discussed Chinese perspective, it does offer some valuable insights on the Quad, and it would tell us how Chinese are looking at it. For years, Chinese officials and commentators have referred to the Quad as an Asian NATO. Uh, Earlier, Wang Yi actually called it as a sea of foam, which is going to dissipate soon. But then later, he actually called it a NATO. And it's, in fact, if you look at the discussion on the Chinese internet by the strategic community, this is a catchphrase. This is a phrase that we keep seeing. So this actually emphasizes its security-driven purpose to counter Beijing's ambitions. Um, so now, Chinese analysts consistently link the Quad's revival to concerns over Chinese expanding influence in the region, in the Indo-Pacific region, in the wider Indo-Pacific region. For instance, the upcoming Coast Guard exercises among the four countries have been is being interpreted by the Chinese expert as attempts to intervene in regional conflicts, which they are saying that this is under the guise of promoting freedom of navigation, but this is just uh, attempt to intervene, interfere in China's affair to make regional stability more vulnerable. However, the discourse within China is far from monolithic, specifically when it comes to Quad and when it comes to any security oriented uh, covert, overt grouping. So, while some view the Quad as a serious challenge to China's regional ambitions, others actually dismiss it as more symbolic than substantive. Then, a lot of Chinese critics argue that the Quad has struggled to achieve tangible outcomes and often falls short of its own expectations. And a key point of contention is the group's reluctance to directly name China in its statements, be it bilateral statements among Quad countries or the Quad statements at any level. So, this omission, according to many Chinese commentators, reveals hesitation among Quad members to fully confront the rising Beijing, and they believe that this is something that is very intentional. They do not really want to confront Beijing, they do not really want to fight the Chinese directly. So, now let's dig deeper into this perspective. Uh, Analysts like Qian Feng of Tsinghua University suggest that economic and strategic ties between China and the individual Quad member countries, specifically India and Australia, are significant factors in why China has not been named in any of the statements. And this economic interdependence that China has been capitalizing on for years, and in fact, this has been fostered or cultivated by China. So, of course, for a favorable outcome, this fosters a cautious approach within the Quad. And in fact, there's a lot of discussion about Japan too, who has been kind of seen as confrontational towards China since the tenure, since the era of Shinzo Abe. So now the perspective, the discourse in Chinese media and social media has been that Japan too is now seen as balancing its alignment with the Quad while seeking improved ties with China. And this is primarily because of the uncertainty and the problems that are going to arise during Trump 2.0, specifically with respect to US Japan relations. Then at the same time, there are some Chinese analysts who argue that Trump's potential return to power might lead to a reassessment of the Quad. Um, then a minority view in China also suggests that Trump's policy approach is more ideological driven than Biden's. It focuses more on the tangible interest of the United States, and this could result in shifts in how the Quad is going to operate. And this might also mean that Trump potentially might push for a more burden sharing approach where Quad members and other alliances would have to contribute more significantly to collective security. And I think this is something that we have been hearing for a very, very long time. And this was a very common feature of Trump first administration. This is not something that I would say, and I would call it a major factor shaping how the Quad is going to operate. And the fate of Quad would be based on Trump's burden sharing approach, or I don't think this is an indication telling us that Trump is going to withdraw from Quad. But despite these debates, there is a consensus among Chinese analysts that the Quad will endure. There's a scholar from the Chinese Institute of International Studies, Ning Tuanhai, who believes that relying on alliances and groupings like the Quad is very important for the US, as the US will continue to focus on containing China. He also notes that while Trump's return might reshape how the US diplomacy is going to look like, it is unlikely that the US is going to dismantle the Quad. Instead, the group may face new challenges in maintaining internal cohesion, but it is definitely going to adapt to how the second Trump administration would function, and it might also be one of the priorities of Trump administration. Then, interestingly, some Chinese commentators also see Trump's return as a potential advantage for China. Some, in fact, have even termed his second term as a strategic asset for China. Then one Chinese scholar, Wang Guan of the Chongyang Institute of Financial Studies, argues that Trump's presidency could accelerate China's technological advancement, which is we are seeing that it's already happening. Then it might also deepen China's partnership with countries other than the US. Thereby, it might lead to countering US strategic interests in the Indo Pacific region. So now, after all these views and perspectives, now the question arises, will the Quad weaken under Trump 2.0? Uh, I don't think there's any simple answer to that. But while uncertainties abound, the Quad seems likely to persist. And its members share a common interest in promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific, and I think this is going to persist even if their approaches and their priorities differ. And this is not something that we are going to see right now. This has been happening even since the Quad was revitalized in 2017 and 18. We have seen that how the four countries' interests and priorities have differed, and how they have been able to navigate these differences and keep the Quad afloat. But the Chinese analysts agree that, of course, they've already said that a lot of scholars believe that the Quad is likely to persist, the disbandment is not going to happen, but the group's evolution and or trajectory will depend on how effectively its member navigate the internal dynamics and external pressures. So to conclude, I would say that the Quad has weathered challenges before and appears poised to endure, even in different geopolitical situations, even in a shifting geopolitical landscape. So Trump's return might bring new dynamics to it. There's no doubt to it. We have to wait and see how his policy is going to be. And then I feel there's a lot of uncertainty about it. There's a lot of speculation about it. But the Quad's core purpose to counterbalance China remains relevant, even to Trump 2.0. And as the Quad leaders and officials from its member countries have reiterated time and again, I echo their sentiment that the Quad is here to stay. And I believe that it will survive the imminent uncertainty of Trump 2.0 administration, and it is definitely going to stay and survive. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.